When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about who is Azor Ahai, or who is this prince that was promised. Now, this is a very complex question, and I know everybody on YouTube has their own different answers to this in the community, so before I even give my own evidence, give me, who do you think is the prince that was promised? We're going to talk about really 3 different people for this specific video. If you guys really like this video a lot and you want me to do a follow-up, I can talk about some of the more minor candidates that people like to bring up that have some evidence behind them, but we're going to focus on 3 main candidates for this video. I believe personally that if you're going to talk about Azor Ahai, the main 3 you have to talk about are Daenerys, Jon, and Aegon, aka Young Griff. Now, the reason I bring up Young Griff in this is, as we'll talk about later on, is because of his blood. But we have to kind of figure out, what does this whole Azor Ahai and prince that was promised even mean? So we know during the long night, there seem to be these heroes that seem to sprout up all over the world. And they're all given different names by where they are in the world. So the long night seemed to have impacted Westeros and parts of Essos, especially in the coasts. And all of these different areas give this prophesized hero character a different name. Now, I personally believe that Azor Ahai and the prince that was promised is the same character, or the same prophecy that's being alluded to. George R. R. Martin himself kind of seemed to back this up as well, and characters within A Song of Ice and Fire seem to relate the two as being one.
Melisandre sees that the Lord of Light gives him a token
Your sword awaits you.
of his role as the prince that was promised by ancient prophecy, and that's the sword Lightbringer.
When I look at this theory, and I look at the idea of Azor Ahai, we kind of have to look at the origin and the background information to kind of build up and give us some context as to who actually is the prince that was promised. Now, the first part of this is going to be that we've kind of gotten these prophecies, and this prince that was promised is allegedly this theory where eventually somebody will return. When the darkness comes, the others return, which seems to be happening in the main story. Melisandre seems to imply that this person will be born amidst smoke and salt, and also that they will be born under a bleeding star. A number of other people also back up this information, like, for instance, Aemon. And we know the Targaryen family is very heavily linked to this theory, especially from what George R. R. Martin has put into the television show House of the Dragon, and what seems to be implied about Aegon's dream and how that connects to the prince that was promised. It seems like this prophecy of A Song of Ice and Fire traveled all the way down through the Targaryen line until it was lost at one point. Then Aerys I rediscovered this prophecy along with Bloodraven, it would appear, and that then seemed to trickle down again in the Targaryens until the latest sighting of this prophecy came from Rhaegar himself, when he seemed to discover this scroll, I'm assuming for himself. That's when he started to become, more of a knight and all of these things. And Rhaegar, for a long time, believed that he was the prince that was promised. Now, we'll talk about who he actually believed it was later on in his life, and that will relate to why I think Aegon is relevant in this video. But the idea seems to be that this person, that 1, they have to fulfill how they were born as a character. 2, they have to come from Aerys and Rhaella's line, because we know in the story that a prophecy is given by the Woods Witch that Aerys and Rhaella's line would have the prince that was promised. And so for me, I personally believe this to basically be fact. I believe the ghost of Highheart was probably the same Wood Witch. This makes the most sense to me. And if that is the case, this person has already done a lot of different things and prophesized that were correct. Things like the Red Wedding, for instance, or the Faceless Men, some of their interactions. This is a very legit source, in my opinion, personally. And so if you're going to look at this and go, okay, we now have to limit it down to somebody that fills in all these qualifications that Melisandre has set up, and also they have to be somebody of Aerys and Rhaella's line. Now, some people will argue some of that, and so that goes to a whole different video, right? But we're going to stay within those parameters. Who at this point of the story is from Aerys and Rhaella's line? There's really, I guess, 4 debatable options at the moment. One being Daenerys herself. Of course, she is a daughter of Aerys and Rhaella, so she right off the bat fits this right away. There's no other theory crafting that needs to be made. She right away fits this video. Number 2 would be, well, young Griff. Now, the issue with young Griff is we don't know if this young Griff character posing as Aegon, the son of Rhaegar and Elia, who Rhaegar himself believed to be the prince that was promised, we don't know if this person actually is Rhaegar's son. So with Aegon, again, you can go back and forth in the theory. It's really enjoyable to think if he's a Blackfire or if he's a Targaryen. He still has Targaryen blood, but again, it's very important. If he's a Blackfire, he can't fulfill this idea of Rhaella and Aerys's line. But for this video, let's just say that he is. I think there's more evidence that points to him being a Targaryen than the next person. The next person that maybe fits this idea would be Tyrion. A lot of people have speculated at the idea that Tyrion is a Targaryen based upon Aerys and the way that he was treating Joanna Lannister or Tywin's wife, and the timing matches up to where there is a possibility that Tyrion could have actually been a Targaryen, and you look at some of his more physical disadvantages, those also would make sense given the Targaryens and all of their incest and all of that stuff. I don't personally think that the Tyrion argument for him being a Targaryen is all that strong, so I'm not going to include him in this video, but if we do a follow-up video to this, he will be included. And the last one is Jon himself. Rhaegar and Lyanna, I'm a firm believer that that is basically the case at this point, and so if you're believing that it comes from Aerys and Rhaella's line, well, Rhaegar having another son in Jon obviously would fit that. So we've kind of limited it down to 3 candidates. Those seem to be the most likely that could fit this Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised category. So let's limit it down to the one person that I don't think is as likely as the other 2. Young Griff, obviously, to me, is just, it's tough to argue him as the prince that was promised because, well, right away, he wasn't introduced until book 5, so he's not really a main character at this point of the story. We also don't really have this kind of fitting into this prophecy of born amongst salt and smoke. There just doesn't seem to be anything there, like figuratively or literally. We know that he seemed to have been born under like a red comet situation. That's what Rhaegar sees on his birth, and that's why he becomes the prince that was promised in Rhaegar's mind. But we have almost no evidence to make any type of claims about, Aegon being born and fitting this prophecy. So that's just the issue. He fits into, if young Griff is Rhaegar's son, he fits into being a Targaryen from the right line. He fits into having the red comet, apparently, and, he fits being a Targaryen. But there's just such lacking evidence compared to the next 2 that it's kind of easy to dismiss him. Now, young Griff is not done in this video because I'm going to give you my actual thoughts on this prophecy towards the end, but I want to break down each candidate as we go. So the next candidate being Daenerys. Now, Daenerys, to me, at this point of the story, I believe is probably the person that has the most evidence for being Azor Ahai or the prince that was promised, because a lot of the other qualifications, I just don't think we've seen how they're going to play out with Jon yet, and I'll get to Jon when we get there, because Daenerys, to me, has the strongest claim. She fits this, archetype of being this character that was born amongst salt and smoke. And you can go multiple ways with that. You can say, again, on her birth, there was a huge storm that would implicate the salt. Then you look at smoke, and you look at her being figuratively reborn as a Targaryen with her dragons, and the end of book 1, her bringing about magic back into the world has got to be a huge point in her favor. And also, you look at the idea that the red comet spawns on this, basically her bringing back magic, her bringing back the dragons, her being reborn. She fits all of those qualifications very easily. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think it's very much on the nose why a lot of characters believe that she is the person that is the prince that was promised. Even Maester Aemon, as wise as he is, believes that to be the case. And you might be thinking, well, how is the prince that was promised a girl? How is it Daenerys, right? Wouldn't it be the princess that was promised? And Maester Aemon has an explanation. Because Maester Aemon believes it has to be a Targaryen and that has to be a dragon, well, dragons can change their sex. And so he believes that it's kind of like a Star Wars situation in the prequels where we misread the prophecy. It could have been a girl or a boy. And so he believes by the time he dies that it is Daenerys Targaryen who is this person of Azor Ahai. So I think it makes a lot of sense because you think about it also, when Daenerys gets over to Westeros, the others are likely going to be through the wall already. So the darkness has already descended into the world as they've gotten through the wall, and Daenerys comes over with the dragons, with the fire, being this Azor Ahai type figure. Now, there are some other things to consider with Azor Ahai. That Azor Ahai wielded this sword called Lightbringer, and there's some lore that apparently that this sword had to be plunged into Nissa Nissa's heart, and that's what gave this sword its qualities. There isn't really anything like that to look at with Daenerys herself, outside of her weapon just being fire itself with the dragons. But that's kind of move on now to Jon. I think Jon has a very compelling argument as well, but for very different reasons. So Jon himself is possibly born of the line of Rhaella and Aerys, being that he is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. And given he is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, so we would fit that right away. But here's the thing that gets a little tricky about Jon. For Daenerys, it's quite easy to assume, okay, she was born amongst salt and smoke, and this red comet, it's all there. With Jon, it's a lot more tricky. Because with Jon, well, we don't know the circumstances in which he was born. Could you say, again, the Tower of Joy was destroyed after Jon's birth, and maybe there was some burning of it, but that just doesn't really seem to fit the prophecy. And so we then go to the normal story. Well, you could say when the comet appears in book 2, Jon has kind of been reborn. He's now a man of the Night's Watch. He's worried about facing this threat of the others as he's fully now committed to the Watch and going north of the Wall. The comet there seems to be in complete relation to Daenerys, so it kind of feels weird to bring it up here with Jon. But we know that by the end of A Dance with Dragons, Jon actually dies. And there's a number of different connections here. Now, again, I don't think they're as on the nose as they are with Daenerys. So for Jon's argument, you have to dig a little deeper. And that's why I think it's a different case here, because I think Daenerys, all the evidence is much more on the nose. It's right there in your face. You don't have to look too far. With Jon, it's different because Jon has a lot of stuff that goes on in the background that points to the more likely option, right? Now, when Jon dies, he does see these stars while he's dying or whatnot. There's smoke going on in his death, and we hear we see all the signs, right? I'll have some quotes up during this part of the video so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But the more important thing that I think about with Jon is that Jon dreams of him being basically Azor Ahai, wielding this sword of light, maybe having Lightbringer himself. And Jon himself has a Valyrian steel sword called Longclaw. Now, Valyrian steel swords were made with dragons, right? They came from Valyria, hence the name. So you could say, in a way, Jon has a sword made of fire. Daenerys does not have that. Jon also, in his last chapter where he is killed, we actually get a reference to the prince that was promised in that very chapter and being born and all that stuff. When Melisandre is looking for, visions and all those things, she keeps asking for Azor Ahai. Now she's referencing Stannis, but she only sees Snow. She only sees Jon. Why is that? So that's why I think it's really interesting, because I think Jon is this person that is a defender of men, and he's going against this threat that we believe is the darkness and the shadow that Melisandre is alluding to. So Jon fits that parameter. He's already doing what we see Azor Ahai seem to be doing. And Jon also would fit a bit of what we see with the northern folktales, with this hero who fought against the others and teamed up with the children of the forest, because Jon himself is someone that's teaming up with the wildlings. He likely will be somebody trying to broker, the peace and get everyone to go north to fight against the others, similar to the show, but I think very different as well. So Jon fills some of those pieces, but I also think Daenerys fits some of those pieces. What is the true answer? And so as of right now, again, we don't know the context of how Jon is going to be reborn. Is there going to be a sacrifice involved, where there'll be fire involved with Melisandre bringing him back? How will that all go down? So I think there's more questions with Jon than Daenerys at this point of the story. But I want to put out what I believe is the true theory. I do not believe there is one person that is Azor Ahai. I believe that Azor Ahai is a prophecy that will be fulfilled through numerous people. And I think likely the people that will be involved, and the reason I picked the three that I did, is because we do get this also point here from Aemon that there are three heads of the dragon. Aemon even thinks that he might have been one of those three heads if he had been younger. So, who are the three heads? Well, we have, it seems, three alleged dragons in Jon, Daenerys, and young Griff. I think all three will play a role that will fulfill this Azor Ahai. Likely, Jon will be the person that is able to bring everyone together to fight the others, and will be representing, the ice side of the Song of Ice and Fire. That's another part to consider in this idea. He is also somebody that has ice and fire in his blood if Rhaegar and Lyanna are his parents. Daenerys will bring the fire. She will bring forces, and she will bring up that backup to destroy the others, or at least pose somewhat of a threat to the others in their invasion. Young Griff could also serve as a means of bringing the South, and he's already taken the throne, and maybe putting aside his disagreements he may have with Daenerys to fight the others, forming the three heads of the dragon. And this will be especially true if all three of them get a dragon. Daenerys having Drogon, Jon maybe having Rhaegal, and Aegon maybe getting Viserion. So there would be three heads of the dragon. All three would play their own role in fulfilling the prophecy to be able to defeat the others, or at least broker some peace with the others. That is what I believe the Azor Ahai prophecy is about. I don't think it's about one single person. I think it's about everyone fulfilling their own role. If you even think about the legends of the Long Night and how it ended, we have all these different figures or names for this figure that helped bring about that end. Even in the legend, it seems to show that the world unified and rallied behind all these different heroes, unless you think all of these heroes mean the same person, which I don't think it is the case. So, in my opinion, it just means these heroes will have to rise to the occasion to defeat the others. Whereas the whole story has been about the division of the country and not taking the true threat seriously, the fulfillment of that story will be the unification of these different people coming together to at least defeat or defend from the other's invasion. Now, the after effects will probably be very different. We may see young Griff and Daenerys have some sort of conflict, which I likely think will end up in Daenerys maybe winning, but maybe that pushes her over the edge, and maybe Jon has to kill Daenerys, similar to the show. Who knows how this stuff will go down, and especially with Winds of Winter not looking to be any closer and in sight, we'll just have to wait. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.